Hello and greetings everyone, Darth Boreas here. Now today I wanted to do a quick summarization and addition to some of the videos that I've already made. One of the main problems when you're doing unscripted videos is that you forget things, wrap up, and then you realize, damn it, I could have explained that better, or I forgot something. So this is basically my addition to what I've said so far and try to explain things a little bit better. So the topics for today are mostly the dark side cosmic force thing that I mentioned, the entire thing about the Sith and not being the strongest dark side users. I will talk about canon and probably a little bit about the fanon. Now, with that said, I shall start with the canon thing. So I thought I'd break it down in an easier way to people who are not familiar with how the Star Wars canon used to work. I think it would have been better to stick with the original one, and that's serious levels like G canon is basically George canon, which means what it says. It's basically whatever George Lucas said in interviews, has written himself or directed in the movies, which means that whatever George had his hands on trumps everything else. That, most importantly, does not mean that other things are not canon. It just means that if there is anything in other levels of canon that somehow conflicts with what George said or wrote, then this is overruled by George's version. Now, we have many examples of this happening. Probably one of the more known examples is the video game Republic Commando, where Delta Squad is brainwashed into doing Order 66. Now, George said in the Clone Wars episode with Rex going after Ahsoka, I don't know which one that was exactly, that they had an inhibitor chip in their brain from the very start. So, as you can see, this doesn't affect the outcome at all. If they have been brainwashed or an inhibitor chip, doesn't really make a difference. It's not a big canon break or anything. It's just that George said it's an inhibitor chip, and thus he overruled what the Delta Squad in Republic Commando has said before the Order 66 episode even got out. So they have done the game, I think, 10 years before that or so. Well, not 10 years, but quite some years before that, and said something else. And George, after that, said it happened differently. So George canon rules. So canon is that it was inhibitor chips, not brainwashing. Now, that doesn't mean that the entire rest of the game wouldn't be canon. In fact, the entire rest of Republic Commando is canon and is supported and is factually true. It's just this one minor thing that George disagreed with that was overruled. The entire rest of it is still canon. Now, that is important to realize, because most fans think if it's not G canon, it's not canon. That is not true at all. Everything that was published by LucasArts, by Lucasfilm, or licensed companies is canon. It's just that different levels of canon can overrule lower levels. So George canon, G canon is the absolute highest tier. That said, there is T canon. Now, T canon is the next level, the second level. It's television canon. So anything that happens in the TV shows, that happens in the movies, trumps what happens in tier 3. Tier 3 is C canon, continuity canon. That goes for the comics, for basically all of the books, that goes for the video games, that goes for pretty much every other product made, like the magazines, certain fan art, and not fan art, certain art that was officially licensed by LucasArts and stuff like that, the card games. Everything that happens there is still canon. It's continuity canon. And then the last level is N canon, or better said, non-canon. Now, non-canon is anything that is basically I forgot S canon. There's still S canon, and S canon is basically special, like things like certain video game mechanics that are not considered canon per se, but can be on occasion. Now again, that doesn't mean that the games or the writing or the characters aren't canon. They are canon. It means that certain game mechanics might not be considered canon, which goes for, say, a mana bar, that you kinda can only cast so much force powers before you have to replenish or collect an item to regain your force power or anything. Obviously that's not how the force works, that's just a game mechanic. Doesn't mean that the force powers we see in games wouldn't be canon, it's just that certain game mechanics are questionable and probably not canon at all, which would be the next tier, the non-canon, the N-canon. And N-canon basically is all alternate timeline stories. So everything that happens in what-if scenarios is not canon, that's just speculation. Now the important thing is that G, T, C and S canon, everything of that is still considered canon. It's just that if something of a lower tier would happen to conflict with something of a higher tier, the higher tier wins. That's all. That doesn't mean that any of the canon of the other products isn't Star Wars or isn't real or isn't lore or isn't canon. It's just a different layer, and it can get more complicated because there is certain books where George wrote the intro, but the entire book is considered C canon, but the parts that George wrote would be G canon. That's something that I brought up in a debate about the Grey Jedi and the Grey Force. Now it is true that nowhere in canon is the term Grey Jedi ever used. Not once. Not for Obi-Wan, not for Ahsoka, not for Qui-Gon, not for Kyle Katarn, not for Jaden Korr. Nowhere in lore is the term Grey Jedi ever mentioned. So the term Grey Jedi can be considered non-canon, or I would consider it fanon, which is basically F. That sounds wrong, but it's basically F canon, and fan canon is basically not considered canon, but I wouldn't say it's non-canon either, because it's something that most fans or a vast part of the fandom agrees should be canon or is canon, just like the Grey Jedi thing. Now, Grey Jedi is a term that fans made up for certain characters and use for certain characters, and it totally fits and explains what they are and what they do, but officially Grey Jedi don't exist. That doesn't mean that the Grey Force doesn't exist, because George himself in the Mortis arc in Clone Wars Season 3 Episode 15 and some later ones, George himself wrote and directed that episode and was highly involved with the characters there. So the entire idea that the light side is the balance is out the window, which was George's original idea for the Force, but he tracked back in Clone Wars already, and just like his opinion on lightsabers, changed that. And this is G canon, so that there is a balanced side of the Force, a grey side, and that light and dark are two opposites, two extremes that are fighting each other, and that the balance is between those two. That's actually G canon. That's something that George himself wrote, and that means that it trumps everything else. And for G canon, if something George said in the 80s, that's obviously overruled by something that George said later on, like in the 2010s. So whatever George said later trumps what he said earlier, which is the case of Clone Wars, because I think the last statement we have from George about how the Force works is indeed that there is a grey side, and that the grey side is the balance between those extremes that balances out the light and the dark side. So Yoda was wrong. That is G canon. So with that said, the fans made a huge effort to explain things and to do away with certain problems in the lore. Now, for Lucas, these problems often don't even exist, because he says if someone else says something that doesn't fit what I'm saying, it's out the window. Now, for fans, this is a problem, because first of all, some of Lucas's ideas, like the whole midichlorian thing, are pretty bad, and there is other writers that did the midichlorian thing way better and explained them way better than George and more scientific than George. So many fans consider what another writer said about midichlorians more canon than what George said, because most fans just hated George's idea on that. And in the fanon, this other explanation of midichlorians is much, much better. So that's what the fans go with. Similarly, the fans in the fanon really try the hardest, and these are people that know Star Wars better than most writers often. These are fan polls. I've spoken about the Wisdom of Mass and stuff like that, where hundreds and thousands of nerds that have been into Star Wars for decades and really know the stuff in and out agreed on certain things that explain certain problems in the lore, and that's the fanon. So I'm not against that. I'm actually absolutely for that, because it does often solve issues. Now, with that said, one example is the power level of the Sith that we see in the movies and the TV shows, because it has often been stated that the later Sith, as in Palpatine and Vader, were more powerful than any Sith before them, which is clearly debunked by what we see in the Old Republic and ancient Sith material, because those were obviously much more powerful than Palpatine or Vader. But according to George, that's not the case. However, that is what we see in the material, and that's why fans say, well, the ancient Sith were the most powerful, then came the Old Republic Sith, and actually the rule of two Sith are the weakest, not the strongest, because that's just what we see. And there's dark side users that are more powerful than Sith. A good example is Mother Talzin. Now, Mother Talzin lives in the same era as Palpatine, and Palpatine needed the help of Dooku and, was it Maul? I think it was Maul and Dooku in order to defeat Talzin. He couldn't do it by himself. And that's when Mother Talzin was already in her weakened state. So weakened Mother Talzin needed Sidious, Maul and Dooku to defeat her, which should speak something about her power level. And she had powers that Palpatine could never dream of, like shape-shifting and flight, which Palpatine just didn't have. And Mother Talzin, just like the Night Sisters of Dathomir, was a super powerful dark side user, but not a Sith. That's a different thing. And what many people don't realize is that the Jedi are just a religion. It's not the light side or the light side lore or anything. Similar, the Sith are a religious order. They are not the dark side. They are not all the Darksiders. You can be a Darksider and not be a Sith. Actually, most Darksiders aren't Sith. So just to point that out. Now, with the entire Grey Jedi thing, the Grey Jedi Code, as example, is completely fanon. You will see it on various posters. You will see it in even licensed art. You will see it put together in mashups with the dark and the light side codes of the Jedi and the Sith respectively, and the Grey Code is really just a mashup of those two, and I think explains the middle ground very well. And this could have been an official thing from the quality and the thought that went into it, but it's not. It's fanon, but it's still something that most people agree can totally be used, because yeah, makes sense. It's pretty good. Now, with that said, I have to think for a little. I wanted to go into something else, and my role-playing group is starting soon. I'm reading. So the thing is, right. So the way that the Force works in Lucas's mind is more scientific and less mystical. Now, for most fans, it should be the other way around. And there is a sort of in-between where some fans said, well, maybe the Force is similar to physics, mostly the dark energy and dark matter thing, because that exists, and it's physics, it's science, we just don't understand any of it, and We just have to guess what the hell that even is. Might be the Force. There's actually people that actually believe that it's the Force in real life, which you can think about whatever you like, but that's just how some people interpret things to be. What else did I want to talk about? I think I'm wrapping it up here. For what I want you to understand is that all levels of canon, may it be G canon, T canon, C canon, S canon, or N canon, or even, well, N canon, F canon, not so much, but from an official perspective, what Disney made, what George made, what is in the television, what is in the books, the comics, the video games, for the vast majority of it, except gameplay mechanics, is actually canon. Starkiller is canon. Starkiller is a thing in Star Wars. The character, the writing, all of that is canon. As much as some people wouldn't like it to be, but it is. Just like with the whole grey side and all of that, that is actually canon. It's a part of Star Wars, and you can't just hand with it away by saying, oh, but George didn't write that. No, he didn't, but he approved that, and he advised on that, and he helped the game creators to create these characters and stories. So it's definitely in there. It's definitely canon. Now, Disney canon, it says it trumps everything else because it's now the new company and yada yada yada, but most fans don't accept Disney canon at all, and just go with the old system because that makes so much more sense, and Disney can't even keep their own canon together. So most fans just ignore Disney canon, which I personally also advise you to do. Though the fun part is that Disney canon, despite declaring anything but the movie non-canon, draw heavily themselves from the expanded universe. So yeah, that's that. Now, with that said, I think I got everything down, and I wish you a fantastic day. May the Force be with you.